If you think he's demonic now, right, because of what we've learned about him, I pointed out that House of Cards was one of the most brilliant exposés against the cabal on television.
That's right.
House of Cards included.
We talked about it on this show.
That's right, man. House of Cards exposed Bohemian Grove, for God's sake.
Right.
You have Kevin Spacey in a robe,
right,
saying some of the world's most powerful people gather in this place. And then what's even funnier is that they called it Elysian Fields, and then very recently, one of the largest pedophile rings in the world was broken up, which was called Elysium. Okay?
Yep. And
so if you can't handle forgiving Kevin Spacey, or even being able to see that the reason why he might have gotten outed first was that he did that exposure of Bohemian Grove,
right,
then we have a problem. And the problem is that the people who are turning against the cabal now were in it before. Just like in the early 1800s, around the 1824, 1830, around that window, we had a massive revolt against the Freemasonic Society in America that led to it being completely wiped out in North America, in the northern states rather, and in the southern states, all but a few lodges remained. The reason why being that there was a man named William Morgan who had published all of the secret codes of the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, and then they killed him by tying a bunch of rocks onto ropes, and the rocks were heavier than his body, and they dumped him over the side of a rowboat in the Niagara River. So, and he pleaded for his life, and he had a wife and kids, and they killed him anyway. But then the people who did it felt bad, and it all got exposed, and it actually led to a party that was called the Anti-Masonic Party. They won a couple governorships, they won some Senate seats, and then they became known as the Whig Party, which is where most people have probably heard of it. That whole anti-Masonic revolt led to some really, really stunning stuff. There was a book by David Bernard called Light on Masonry, and that book, you can still get it. It actually exposes all 32. They didn't get up to 33 very much, but everything from first degree through 32nd degree Freemasonry, all the codes, all the initiations, all the stuff these guys do. It's all in that one book. They had congressional hearings. They had hearings in the state government offices of New York State. New York State was a big deal back then because this is early 1800s. New York was like the biggest state in America at the time. So my point in saying all this is that what we saw in the anti-Masonic revolt of the late 1820s was people who had been in this organization, who had done things that were heinous because they were forced to, because they were part of a cult. They were part of a sinister group that forces all of its members into what they call common criminality, right? Which means nobody can ever talk because they can pin all this stuff on you. Nonetheless, if you actually read David Bernard's book, Light on Masonry, what we see in that book and others like it is that people who were buried in this stuff up to their eyeballs came forward and revealed information that led to this thing being shut down for its time. And they were not treated as criminals. They were given amnesty, and they were treated as heroes because on their own conscience they decided to do something different. They're not going to play the game anymore. So the problem we're going to have is, and I'm not just speaking about Trump, I'm speaking about anybody. Everybody's dirty. Everybody's got dirt that, if exposed, is going to make them look bad. And so what we're really going to have to do here is we're going to have to say, yes, these people are heroes because they're fighting against a greater evil, and the things they did were things that they did through coercion. And in fact, that actually could exonerate a lot of people in the cabal, because even folks like senators and congressmen, one of the most outrageous briefings I got from Pete Peterson was when he told me that you have mercenaries hired by the cabal capturing senators out of their homes in the middle of the night, throwing black bags over their head with twist ties on them, twisting it up, throwing them into the back of a van So they're sliding around and they're doing screeching turns. So these guys are slamming up against, they're getting head injuries. They're getting all kinds of bodily injuries as the van is going around.
Right.
They bring all these senators out into an area. They take the bags off of their heads, and they got a big log chipper there. And some of the aides of these congressmen had been exposing the cabal online, and they literally threw these guys into the chipper shredder. And they had the option, quote unquote, of, well, you can go in yourself, or we're going to throw you in. Of course, nobody did that. They all were thrown in. But so imagine, when we find out that the majority of, I don't know how many it's going to be. I don't know how many they've agreed on revealing, but let's just say a majority of senators and congressmen are members of NAMBLA, which is North American Man-Boy Love Association, a pedophile organization network that trades photographs, video, and also, the actual trafficking of humans. You got to think a little deeper than this, because some of the insiders I've spoken to have said, if you want to play in the political game at all, if you want to even run in an election at all, you are required to have sex with children, even if it disgusts you and you don't want anything to do with it. That's the kind of compromise you have to make. They force you to do it. You don't have a choice. And in some cases, people wake up intoxicated, not even realizing what's going to be happening to them as they wake up. So how do you defeat a group that automatically makes everyone who's ever been involved a criminal? And a criminal of such a heinous extreme that if that was exposed, they lose all credibility with the public. That's the challenge that we have, and that's why I believe I've been getting for years now, in predominantly in dreams, very specific messages saying that we have to be able to forgive people, because the stuff that's going to come out is ugly, but there is a real resistance here. And if somebody has been involved in this kind of heinous stuff and they decide to turn over a new leaf and become a new person and become a hero, we have to be willing to let them do that. Corey Goode has admitted to having done some very unsavory things during his service. It's part of what anybody in those things has to do. But now, for the most part, I mean, there's certainly some people who dislike Corey online, but for the most part, he still has a great deal of public support and goodwill. And I still am very much in support of him, and his intel has been invaluable. And everybody, for the most part, except for a few, considers him a hero.